A bombshell report just out by the New York Times exposing how the Pentagon last week risked American lives in an illegal airport scheme. Now, you may remember last week, news came out, we all heard it. The El Paso airport has been shut down. And what was that all about? No one knew. We were like, what's going on? Then later in the week, word came out, oh, there were Mexican cartel drones flying over the area and they were shooting down the airport. They were shutting down the airport so they could shoot down the drones, apparently. Well, you won't believe what has been exposed by this New York Times reporting. Look at this. This has turned into a total debacle and an embarrassment for the Trump administration, and it reveals how reckless they are and how incompetent they are and how callous they are. All three: incompetent, reckless, and callous. Okay, and those are three things that mark this administration from top to bottom and from start to finish. And I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time before there's some catastrophic accident that is going to be the fault of all of this incompetence and this infighting and this I'm bigger than you and I'm strong, you can't tell me what to do, and all these ego trips in this administration. It's going to be a nightmare. Just another reason why I, as a lifelong Republican, couldn't vote for Trump as of, starting in 2015 when he first announced he was running for president. Because I mean, anybody who's watched Trump for more than an hour knows he's incompetent and he's ignorant. And he's not qualified to be president. And he can't even appoint people who are qualified for their jobs. Anyway, listen to this story. It's pretty scary, actually. Last spring, I'll read a good bit of it and then make a couple of comments. But last spring, in the early months of Steve Feinberg's tenure, now let me point this out. This is Steve Feinberg up here in the picture. He's sitting right next to Secretary Pete, Brother Pete, as we call him, because he's a big fan of Doug Wilson and goes to a Doug Wilson church, which, if you don't know about that, that's a whole nother thing. I'm not going to get into it right now, but look into it because it is a big deal and it explains a lot about what these people believe theologically and what kind of drives them and motivates them to do these idiotic, crazy things they do. Anyway, okay, last spring in the early months of Steve Feinberg's tenure as Deputy Defense Secretary, Pentagon staff members briefed him on plans to employ new high-energy laser weapons to take out drones being used by Mexican cartels to smuggle drugs across the southern border. So the Mexican cartels, they believe, were smuggling drugs with drones, and they said, we have a great plan to use a high-energy laser beam to take the drones out. Okay, I don't know, sounds good to me. I'm sure he said, oh, okay, cool, that's cool. But their use was conditioned on getting a green light from aviation safety officials. Look, I am in no way qualified to be in any high-level position in government. But if I had been in this position and they'd come to me and said, you got to get the approval of the FAA because it can interfere with aviation safety, I would say, yes, okay, let's do that. Even if I worked at the Pentagon, which is, more powerful than the FAA, obviously, I would say, yeah, of course, we have to do that. We can't kill civilians. I mean, there are teenagers I would vote for president over these people. Seriously, they would be far more competent to do these jobs, even with no experience, just a little knowledge about life, and a little caring and concern about human life and people. All right, so they came to him and said, but you have to get approval from the FAA, basically. The law, the staff members at the Pentagon explained to him, required extensive coordination with the Federal Aviation Administration and the Transportation Department, which could slow the testing of the system. Transportation officials could even block the system's use if they determined that it posed risk to aviation safety. All right. Now, think about this. You're at the Pentagon. You're like, oh, who's the FAA to tell me what to do? Bunch of softies trying to slow things down, throw a wrench in the works, a bunch of bureaucrats. I mean, that's no wonder nothing ever gets done in government. All these agencies slowing everything down. I'm just going to bluster through and do what we need to do and shoot down those drones, which turned out, by the way, to be a party balloon. Wait till we get to the end of the story. There were no drones. It was a party balloon. They tried to shoot it down. It's unbelievable. But, there's a reason that agencies work together because they are, and think about it, most of government is there to protect the people. The Defense Department is there to protect us from foreign threats, from invading armies and all that. Okay, that's understandable. The FAA is there, Federal Aviation Administration, to protect us in flight safety, to provide, sufficient flight safety so it's safe to fly. And they do a great job. So, yes, of course, the Pentagon, even though they're more powerful than the FAA, would have to get the FAA's approval if they're going to do this around an airport that could put flights at risk. But this Pentagon, under Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, said, no, we're not doing that. We don't have to do that. We're not going to let them push us around. Two people with knowledge of the meeting where the lawyers had advised him that, you can't do this till you get approval from the FAA, people familiar with that meeting who spoke on condition of anonymity, said they recalled that Mr. Feinberg felt the Pentagon had the authority to proceed anyway. We're just going to do it. We don't need their approval. Bunch of pansies at the FAA. Now, Sean Parnell, the chief Pentagon spokesman, denied their account, saying it was a total fabrication. Of course, he denied it. They always deny it. Whenever you see that someone is a spokesman for a government agency that's run by Trump, you can bet your bottom dollar every word out of their mouth is a lie. What these anonymous people said rings true, especially in light of what happened last week at the airport in El Paso. And what Sean Parnell says does not ring true at all. Okay. All right. Now, the question of whether the Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security followed proper procedures and the law in deploying the laser weapon has become a flashpoint within the Trump administration. Now, everybody's it's going to turn into a big, you know, ego trip and a bunch of egos involved and all this infighting and bitterness that's erupting inside the administration as all this chaotic stuff breaks out. All right. So, working alongside military personnel, agents from Customs and Border Protection, which is part of the Homeland Security Department, used the weapon this week not far from El Paso International Airport, prompting fury inside the FAA and a brief shutdown of the airport and airspace in that region. Late Tuesday night, the FAA administrator Brian Bedford caught off guard that the system was being used without authorization, concern for public safety, believed he had little choice but to close down the airport for 10 days, to close the airspace, according to more than half a dozen people. It was an extraordinary decision that surprised the flying public and local officials, and I applaud him for that decision. We all should. He closed it down to keep people safe because they determined this laser weapon being used in the El Paso traffic space was a danger. And it is a danger. And they shouldn't be allowed to do it until they all agree and come up with a plan to do it safely. And the Pentagon refused to do that. So this guy at the FAA administrator, okay, so he's the administrator. Yeah, right. I was thinking of the guy who's head of the transportation department. I forget his name now. Anyway, these guys, the FAA has done a reasonably okay job, I think, since Trump became president. So there's some, I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about this guy. He could be terrible. But in this case, he did the right thing. He closed the airspace. And that was the right thing to do for sure. But get this, under pressure, here again, the callousness of this White House. Under pressure from the White House, Mr. Bedford rescinded the order on Wednesday, setting off a bout of finger pointing within the administration that continued throughout the week. Administration officials told reporters that the FAA didn't warn the White House or the Pentagon that it was about to severely limit flights over a city of nearly 700,000 residents. So, as always, they claim we didn't know anything about it. Nobody told us. Not our fault. Not our fault. Don't blame us. It was some low-level staffer down the line there. Blame it on him. But as always, as well, internal government communications reviewed by the New York Times tells a very different story. Surprise, surprise. In one email dated February 6th, the FAA's top lawyer warned a Pentagon official that deploying the laser system without restricting flights created a grave risk of fatalities or permanent injuries to Americans traveling through that airspace. Okay, so it's an email dated February 6th. That's earlier in the month. It's the 14th now, warning them not to deploy this yet. Another email dated Tuesday shows that the lawyer gave official notification to 14 government employees, including senior officials in the Defense Department, as well as staff members of the White House's National Security Council, of the FAA's intention to close the airspace above the Army base adjacent to El Paso because the laser technology had been used without its approval. You can't do that. You can't put flight safety at risk without getting the FAA's approval, and they're not going to approve anything that puts it at risk. All right. Now, publicly, the administration has yet to acknowledge that a departmental standoff over those weapons led to the airspace closure. They will never acknowledge it. They will never acknowledge anything that's true. Just, keep that in your hat. White House officials declined to comment on Friday and referred to a social media post from Mr. Duffy published on Wednesday that said the administration, Sean Duffy, that's who I was thinking about earlier, uh, published on Wednesday that said the administration acted swiftly to address a cartel drone incursion. Now, listen to this. But that narrative was disputed by multiple people familiar with the situation who said the Border Protection Unit ended up shooting down a party balloon. They shot down somebody's birthday party. The balloon went up and they shot it down. They kept the public safe from that dangerous birthday balloon. Thank God these people know what they're doing. Imagine how many lives were put at risk by that balloon floating over the heads of the residents of El Paso. I mean, think how many people could have seen it and been scared and been, there's a balloon in the sky. I'm just thankful. We should all be thankful that we have a government that can take care of this kind of threat. Okay, so that is what happened. All right. This is just symbolic of the incompetence of this government, and it's going to lead to something bad. I will tell you that. Uh, you know, think about this, even after the FAA put in writing that this created a grave risk of death for Americans in the air, the Pentagon pushed forward anyway. They ignored the law and then tried to sell the public a cover story about cartel drones, which turned out to be a birthday party balloon. This government was explicitly warned, though, that Americans could die if Pete's Pentagon carried out this plan and they turned their back on America and said, screw you, we don't care. We're going to shoot down our laser. We're going to shoot down these drones with our lasers and their civilian aircraft, whether it's safe or not, because we want to and nobody can stop us because we're the Pentagon. And how dare any government agency try to stop us? We're men. We're real men. This government is incompetent, it's lawless, it's reckless, and it's extremely dangerous. And accidents are going to happen. You cannot have this kind of recklessness and lawlessness and incompetence for long without eventually it leading to something catastrophic. Our government, since day one last January, has shown it's the enemy of the American people that it is sworn to protect. They have all violated their most sacred oath, which is to protect Americans. They're killing American citizens, but murdering American citizens because they have the gall to exercise their First Amendment right to free speech and to protest our government. Now they're showing the same callousness just toward the flying public. Yeah, we're going to shoot down balloons with lasers, high-powered lasers. I bet you it cost $1 million to shoot that laser. So they probably spent about $1 million to shoot down a party balloon. Talk about your waste, fraud, and abuse. This government is the king of that. All right. That's it for me. That's all I got. I appreciate you watching. And let's work together. Make sure everybody knows about this story. Let all your MAGA friends know this story. Let them know the truth. And we'll just keep pounding them with the truth and we'll keep pounding them with the facts until this November when hopefully we will get these people out of office. All right. Take care, and I'll see you next time.